Hour number 3 of the program. We appreciate you hanging out with us. If you could hit that like button. We are Sports Take, JAKIB Sports YouTube Network. We're coming to you from Ocean Casino Resort Top Golf. Yes, this is like the appetizer, man, and then the main course tonight, 8 o'clock, with the full-blown draft show. But we are rolling today. Have had a great show. What great guests so far. We have had James Palmer. We have had, in addition to James Palmer, Chris Franklin from NJ.com. And joining us now, you catch him each and every Monday through Friday, along with Jody McDonald on Birds 365. That would be John McMullen. You can also follow him on Twitter at JF McMullen. He is our Eagles insider. John, what's going on, my man?
What's up, guys? How are you?
What's up, man?
John, we're ready, okay? We're under 6 hours now, okay? We're ready for this draft to happen. I'm going to put you right on the spot, right out of the gate. What happens at number 10? Trade up, trade back? Who do they select if they stay put?
The Eagles are trying to get up, and they're trying to get up to get a pass rusher. So, it's Jalen Carter most likely. Will Anderson is probably the top player on their board. I don't think the thought is they can get up high enough, but you never know. If Houston goes Tyree Wilson, all of a sudden Will Anderson starts to fall a bit. He's in the equation, and Wilson as well, because he's got a bit of a medical issue. So when Howie was talking about impact and unique, he was talking about those pass rushers. They want to go up. They don't feel they're going to be in this position very often. That's the plan, at least, is how we described it. They don't plan to be there on merit and lose football games. So they want to take advantage of the situation they're in. And Jalen Carter, this is no surprise to everybody, but if they don't know, he's on the board. So the Eagles are, Jeffrey Lurie's approved that they're allowed to take him. And no surprise, he is a big, big, big part of this.
Well, so I will go. Oh, go ahead, B. Brooks.
I was going to say, so are you saying that 10 and 30 is in play to get Carter? Would you?
I don't. If you think about Seattle at 5, and even Detroit at 6 are the concerns, I think, with Jalen Carter. If he falls below Detroit, I think you really start to see the juices start to flow, because I don't think Las Vegas is going to take him. And then you start talking about Atlanta. What does Atlanta want to do? Do they want Bijan Robinson? A lot of people have speculated that. Are they comfortable with Chicago? Because Chicago would take Jalen Carter. The Eagles have to get ahead of Chicago. To get from 10 to 8, you look at the trade chart, all you'd have to do is give up that third-round pick, 94, to get up there. If Atlanta's comfortable with, say, Chicago's going to take an offensive lineman, not Bijan Robinson, they might be willing to do that. Get the player they want anyway, drop down a couple spots.
John, I will go so far as to say, as I've said consistently over the past weekend on this show today, that Carter is the Eagles' number one priority. And here's what tells you what they think about this young man's talent. The Eagles normally don't take a player that has a lot of baggage off the field. They are such a high culture. They live by this high culture, high character entity. But what I was told across the street was production equals tolerance. And I think that says a lot in terms of they feel that his talent level is such that you can't pass up on him, number one, and number two, that they have enough people in that locker room that they feel like they could lead this young man in the right direction.
Yeah, no question about it. That old talent tolerance equation, the more talent you have, Barrett, this. I mean, the more tolerance you get in the NFL, that's just right. The reality. It might not be right. Jeffrey Lurie's proven in the past as well. He's willing to give people second chances. Yep. That part of it checks out. And then you have, you mentioned Brandon Graham, Fletcher Cox. The Eagles are willing. And even if you bring in Jason Kelsey, guys on the offensive side of the ball, Jalen Hurts, even though he's only 24, the leadership they feel, the locker room. Even last year with C.J. Gardner-Johnson, there were some questions, and they said, we'll control them. We have leaders, and it worked out at least for a year. And then Jordan Davis. I mean, Jordan Davis is sort of a mentor, as young as he is, to Jalen Carter. So that's a big part of it, and having Nakobe Dean here as well. It's a good fit for both sides if the Eagles can figure it out. The problem is, it's a really good player. Seattle might want him. Detroit might want him. Chicago does want him. Chicago's taking him if he gets down to 9. So the Eagles are going to have to go up and get him.
How big a priority is offensive line, John? Is it a priority that high?
It's always a priority with this team. If they take an offensive lineman, if they're forced to stay at 10 and they take an offensive lineman, it wouldn't shock me at all. From what I got, they have their tier 1 players are basically, you're Xing out the quarterbacks for obvious reasons. It's Will Anderson. It's Jalen Carter. It's Tyree Wilson, and it's Paris Johnson. So those are the guys that sort of they have tier 1, and then you start talking tier 2, and that'd be the Nolan Smiths of the world, the Lucas Van Nesses, the Peter Skoronskis, guys in that range. And if you're down to 10, they probably want to fall back a little bit there if you can and pick up some extra draft capital. But if you can't, I think they'd be comfortable with any of those names and call it a day. But, the one thing Howie said, Howie doesn't give me any information on players or anything like that, but occasionally he gives you some input into his themes, his philosophies, things like that.
Right.
And he made it very clear. Because I think a lot of people are focusing on they don't have a 4th, a 5th, and a 6th. If they can get a difference maker, what they feel is a great player, they don't care about that. They want to take advantage of the situation and go up and get a player like Jalen Carter.
Well, that leads to what tier is Bijan Robinson, and how much of this is smoke and how much of it is real in your estimation, John?
Exactly.
I think, he's a tier 1 player. I should have put him in that tier 1. I just don't think the Eagles are taking him. We know we've all been around this team for a long time. The evaluation of the player doesn't make up with the valuation of the spot in their eyes. In other words, they think he's a really good player, but they don't necessarily see the value at number 10. I think a lot of their interest is smoke, maybe to try to get somebody to trade up. In other words, if they can't move up to get what they want, and I was just talking about movement down, if they can convince somebody, if Bijan's still on the board, somebody to come up to take him, and they can pick up some extra draft capital that way. But yeah, count me in the camp. I'm not going to retire like Howard, our buddy Howard, but count me in the camp that they're not taking Bijan Robinson.
Yeah, so what John's referencing is Howard Eskin said he would retire if they took Bijan Robinson with that pick.
Well, Howard though,
and I'll believe
savvy.
it when I see it, by the way.
Yeah, he's not retired. But Howard is savvy. He said at number 10, he made it very clear. So if they drop down and take him, if they move up and take him, it doesn't count.
Right.
He's very savvy.
I've consistently been on the board that there's no way they take a Bijan Robinson, but it just keeps resonating in my ear what Howie said at his most recent press conference when he said, when you're in a position to take a unique player, you'd be foolish not to seriously consider that. He said, but if you just draft just based on need alone and it turns out to be somebody that doesn't pan out, it's a wasted pick. So that word unique continues to stick in the back of my mind because Bijan is a unique player in a draft that's not deep on frontline players. And when you're drafting in the top 12 to 15 everybody wants to feel they come away with one or two. In Houston's case, since they have 2 of the first 12 picks, that they've come away with unique type players.
Yeah, well, I think everybody kind of latched on to that word,
Yep.
Deacon.
Yep.
At least a lot of people, and they said, "Oh, Bijan." Now, I checked the thesaurus.com. I did not see a picture of Bijan under the word unique.
There you go.
Not that, hey, he's a really good player. He's a really good player, but I think they were talking about the pass rushers, the guys I was talking about. And if you listen to Howie further, he talked about unique players on the offensive line when he described it. And he said all their successful guys are unique. And he went down the list. Everybody from former first-round picks like Lane Johnson down to Jason Kelsey, who was unique as a 6th-round pick because of his ability to move, all the way to Jordan Mailata for obvious reasons as a developmental player. He was talking about unique traits at a particular position. Bijan fits that description. I'm not saying he doesn't, but he's not the only one who fits that description.
Right.
And I think for whatever reason, people just said, "Oh, he's talking about Bijan Robinson." Because they want Bijan because it's, skill position player. Most fan bases like skill position players. It's not just Philadelphia; it's everywhere. If you draft Big Barrett Brooks and you get him for a decade, great. But people want guys catching touchdowns, scoring touchdowns, throwing touchdowns.
Well, then right now I'm looking at the draft and the quarterback situation. And are you believing everything as far as, the mix up with all these quarterbacks and where they're going and how it's going to directly affect the order in which these guys pick and trade in and out? What really is going to determine trading in and out? Is it the pass rushers, the quarterbacks, O-line? What would you think would be the biggest thing to get this thing all mixed up?
Well, it's always quarterbacks. And, throughout most of this process, I think a lot of people thought 4 quarterbacks were going in the top 9, and that would really help the Eagles.
Right, right.
As we get closer, kind of drop down to 2 in most of the, really plugged in mock drafts. And now we're back up to 3 because it looks like Tennessee's trying to get up to get CJ Stroud. So it's always about quarterbacks, first and foremost, because not only is it obviously the most important position, but if you're looking to trade down like Arizona, you get more value for a quarterback than somebody going up to get an edge rusher. It might not be right. People look at the trade chart and say, all right, 1,700 points of 7. It doesn't work like that. You saw it with Patrick Mahomes. Chiefs had to overpay to a ludicrous degree to go up and get Patrick Mahomes. And people kind of, there's a lot of revisionist history. They criticized them at the time.
Absolutely.
And now it doesn't matter because if you hit on the quarterback, doesn't matter what you give up. If you don't hit, like Chicago with Mitchell Trubisky or San Francisco with Trey Lance, it looks really, really bad. But quarterbacks always fuel the thing, especially at the top of the draft.
So with that in mind, John, if we're assuming Bryce Young at 1, do you think Stroud is number 2, or do you think that's very much open between Levis and Richardson in that?
No, I think Houston is going edge rusher, and I think it's, what do they like better, Will Anderson or Tyree Wilson? So I think Will or Tyree are going number 2, and then you start talking about what is Arizona going to do. And that's where I think Tennessee might come up to get CJ Stroud. And I don't leave Indianapolis. Indianapolis is interesting because, I think Chris Ballard likes Will Levis. The assistant GM, Ed Dodd is supposedly likes Stroud, but he might be gone. And if you think about Shane Steichen, look where he came from. Man, He just saw the Eagles' offense and what it was able to do with the RPOs and the zone reads. if I'm Shane Steichen, I might look at Anthony Richardson. So, but ultimately, I think Chris Ballard's going to make the decision. He's going to take Will Levis, but it's going to be interesting to see how it shakes out. But if Tennessee doesn't come up, because remember, they're at 11 and Houston is at 12, so they go again. And I think both of them are feeling, well, we might be able to get an Anthony Richardson or even a Hendon Hooker. He's going to go before people realize. Mm-hmm. A lot of people are thinking, the Eagles might be able to trade out at 30 for somebody to get up to draft Hendon Hooker. He might go before that, maybe a lot before that.
Hey, John, what did you think when it came out earlier this week that all of a sudden Levis shot up the betting boards from 400 to 1 prospect to go high in the draft to now 4 to 1? Yeah. All of a sudden, not major money, but the money started moving in his direction.
Well, Jody is the gambling expert, so yeah. I take his advice on that kind of stuff, and it's because think about it, it's kind of hinky if you're Chris Ballard and the NFL pays attention. I'm not trying to accuse anybody of anything, but the point is, it would be easy for this information to get out by certain people, and certain people in the organization might take advantage of it. So the NFL is really careful with this kind of stuff. But from a betting market, Jody told me those types of things, you have a very limited cap. So you can't bet a lot of money because they know there's too much manipulation that can go on, these casinos and these gambling sites. So I don't pay too much attention to that kind of stuff when you see the spike of Will Levis, because a lot of people were saying he was going to go number 1, and that was never the case. Mm-hmm. I mean, Bryce Young is going number 1. So I think people just like value, and they say, let me put a couple bucks down on Will Levis, and maybe I'll win some money.
Yeah, it's a good payoff. How much input does Nick Sirianni have in this process, John?
Oh, a lot. I think, if, this is the Eagles' first draft without a true vice president of player personnel in many years. You had Joe Douglas. Just congratulations to Joe for finally getting it done with Aaron Rodgers. Mm-hmm. Then you had Andy Weidel. Now, remember how he did when Andy left. He promoted John Ferrari, who was a compliance guy, football operations guy, and Alec Halaby, who's an analytics guy. There's no sort of, if you want to use that term, football guy. And I say that they have a huge scouting department. They have plenty of football guys in the scouting department, but there's no clear number 2. There was always a clear number 2 behind Howie Roseman. Now, from a personnel standpoint, there's no clear number 2. Mm-hmm. Who fills that vacuum? Nick Sirianni.
John, let me ask you this. You just brought up Aaron Rodgers because we debated this this week. Now that it's official, he's going to the Jets. When you look at the arsenal of talent the Jets have on both sides of the football, does that make them the odds-on favorite to win the AFC East now, more so than Buffalo? Buffalo's had their shots. They've had to delete some key talent now from free agency. Do the Jets now ascend to the highest pecking order in that division?
Yeah, I mean they're a legitimate contender now. I mean, overnight. That's how quick. I think Garrett Wilson's going to have a monster season with Aaron Rodgers. But yeah, I mean they're really good. The problem, and this is good for the Eagles. Look at the AFC quarterbacks versus the NFC quarterbacks. Yep. I mean, now you're bringing Rodgers over with Mahomes and Burrow and Josh Allen, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. On the NFC side, who's number 2? And how amazing is it that 12 months ago, if I told you guys, if we were here and we were here last year at this time, and I said, Jalen Hurts is be no doubt about it, best quarterback in the NFC. You would have laughed at me.
Mm.
Yeah,
Rightfully
we've been talking about Dallas.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and he just signed a 5-year, $255 million extension. Yeah.
He's number one in the NFC, and number two is not close. It's probably Dak Prescott. I would think. You could make some arguments for
Cousins.
Yeah.
Kirk Cousins, Derek Carr, maybe.
Yeah.
Well, what about
Jared Goff?
And Matthew Stafford was a guy that we were thinking, he's great.
Matthew's a good player if he's healthy, but it's amazing the difference. So, yeah, the Jets are relevant for the first time in a long time, and that's, I get it. He's going to be 40 in December, but he's still a really good quarterback.
How likely is it that Trey Lance gets traded in your estimation, John? Is that a possibility? and if they do that, Purdy may not be able to start the season. How do you think?
Well, that's the thing.
Yeah.
I'm on the air with the biggest Brock Purdy fan in the history of the world every single day. Jody's love of Brock Purdy drives me insane.
It's a little uncomfortable sometimes.
I mean, the guy has played 6 games. He did a tremendous job. But remember, he's got Kyle Shanahan, who is protecting him like you wouldn't believe. 2 things about Trey Lance. One, you know how GMs are. John Lynch isn't going to want to admit he's made a mistake this early. And Rob, you bring up a good point. I think everybody forgets Hassan Reddick wrecked Brock Purdy. He's got a torn UCL. Anybody who's a baseball fan knows he ain't showing up for week 1. I don't care what the 49ers say in April. He ain't showing up in week 1. So they need a quarterback. And they have the built-in excuse to let Trey Lance compete in training camp. They also have Sam Darnold, but they have a built-in excuse to give that kid a second chance. And by the way, anybody who plays, that might be the best team in the NFL, roster-wise.
Yep.
They're going to win games. So Brock Purdy's not going to be there. I don't think they're pulling the plug on Trey Lance unless they get, number 1 picks. And who's giving them a number 1 pick for Trey Lance at this point?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why it's just such a bad look for them that you're almost trying to give them away for pennies on the dollar. Why does that make sense? And
No, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And they need a quarterback because even if you stipulate Brock Purdy as the starter, he's not going to be ready week 1. He's not.
No, it just doesn't make any sense. Yep. Yeah. There's no question about that. All right, so John, when we're sitting here and you're doing Birds 365 tomorrow, are we in shock mode, surprise mode, sort of played out the way you thought mode? Let's forecast a little bit how you think this is gonna go.
Shock mode.
Okay.
What shock mode would probably be to me, Bijan Robinson. So, I don't know about you guys, but that's what would shock me. If they end up with a defensive lineman, which I expect, or an offensive lineman, which I don't expect, but it wouldn't shock me. Even a corner wouldn't shock me. If you're down at 10 and you can't move, right? And you're forced to take the pick, because I think a lot of people forget you need 2 to tango. Just because you want to trade up doesn't mean you can. Just because you want to trade down doesn't mean you can. If they're forced to take that pick, say Christian Gonzalez is there, it wouldn't shock me. So about the only thing that would shock me at 10 is Bijan.
Okay.
At 30, a lot of things could shock me. And that's dependent on what happens at 10 as well. Okay. I've heard the name Matthew Bergeron a lot. Kid from Syracuse who nobody has as a potential, first round pick. And now all of a sudden he's showing up on a lot of people. And I think the Eagles like him. If they go defensive line early, that would kind of shock people, I think.
All right, John, we're looking forward to it, man. We're going to be touching base with you tonight as well during our JAKIB Draft Special, which begins at 8 o'clock right here from Topgolf Ocean Casino Resort. It'll be John, it'll be Mark Barzetta, it'll be Seth Joyner, it'll be Derek Gunn, myself. It's going to be a fun night, John. You sitting there at 10 and 30, there's going to be a lot that could happen either before, after, in between. Strap in, man.
Yeah, man.
Let's go.
And remember how we had 3 first-round picks last year.
Yeah.
He didn't take any of them in the spot he was supposed to take him. He traded out before the draft. He traded up to get Jordan Davis. He traded for A.J. Brown. So I'm going to that's the one thing I'm going to guarantee. They don't pick at 10 and 30.
Right. Makes sense. John, thanks, man. Appreciate you giving us
Appreciate you, man.
All right.
Appreciate
Thanks, guys.
Okay. Yep. We'll talk to you soon. All right. That is John McMullen. We'll be discussing this all with tonight, as well as our cast of thousands. That's for sure. All right. Good stuff there from John. Let's get a quick timeout in here. We'll roll into our final segment, guys. We'll continue with the Eagles chatter. We will mix in a little bit of it. We didn't talk about the NBA yet at all. And Gunnar, I know you got a couple things you want to get off your chest as well regarding the some of these games last night and who's advancing, who isn't. So we'll dig into all those kind of things when we come back. Don't go anywhere. That's Barrett. That's Derek. I am Rob. We're coming to you from Ocean Casino Resort. All right, let's talk about Razor Technology. Razor Technology is the place that you turn to for IT help, for IT security, for a place that can help you make your life a lot easier, both as a business and, as someone who, is just looking to get things off the ground in terms of a business that, goes. I mean, Razor Technology can help you in a lot of different ways. That is for sure. And I know, when you're talking about IT support, there's nobody better. There's nobody better in the business, period. And you can give them a call, 866-797-3282. That's 866-797-3282. You can also reach them online at razor-tech.com.